The air inside the observatory was always cold, but on this particular night in late October it felt different. It was not just the temperature of the air conditioning keeping the massive computers from overheating. It was a chill that seemed to come from the black screens themselves. Outside the dome, the autumn leaves were falling in silence, and the world slept. Inside, the mood was tense, though not because of any loud alarms or flashing red lights. For decades, humanity has been obsessed with the sky. We have built massive telescopes and pointed them into the deep darkness waiting for a sign. When we imagine the worst-case scenario regarding space, our minds always go to the same violent picture: a massive rock slamming into the Earth, firestorms, tsunamis, and the end of civilization. We fear the collision. We fear the physical impact. But as I sat there looking at the data stream coming in from the array, I realized we'd been afraid of the wrong thing. The true worst-case scenario is not a rock hitting us. It is a rock that misses us, but watches us while it passes. The most terrifying threat is not destruction, it is observation. The silence of the universe might not be empty, it might simply be holding its breath. The object was named 3i Atlas. On the screens it was just a string of numbers and a grainy line of pixels, but the reality of it was staggering. It was tearing through our solar system at a speed that defied common sense, 130,000 miles per hour. To put that in perspective, it was moving faster than anything we had ever built and faster than almost any natural rock that belongs to our sun's family. It had come from deep space, from the empty void between the stars. NASA and the other major space agencies had already run the numbers. They checked the math 10 times over. The safety numbers were green. The trajectory was clear. 3i Atlas would miss the Earth by several million miles. It was a safe distance. In the press releases drafted for the next morning, the scientists would tell the public not to worry. They would say it was just another interstellar visitor, a wandering stone passing through our neighborhood. They would use comforting words like inert, harmless, and natural. But looking at the speed and the angle, I felt a cold skepticism settling in my stomach. We humans are arrogant. We assume that if something does not hit us, it is not about us. We assume that if an object looks like a rock, it must be a rock. But 3i Atlas was moving with a precision that felt less like a random tumble and more like a focused sprint. The official report stated that the object was tumbling randomly, but the light curves, the way the brightness changed as it spun, were strangely rhythmic. It was almost too consistent. It was tumbling, yes, but it was tumbling like a well-thrown football, not like a chaotic, jagged stone. This brings us to the dark hypothesis, the one we discussed only in hushed tones near the coffee machine away from the microphones. Imagine for a moment that you are part of a civilization far older and more advanced than ours. You want to explore the galaxy. You want to map the stars and check for life on other planets. But you know that the universe is a dangerous place, so you do not want to be seen. You do not want to announce your presence to potentially hostile species. You would not build a shiny metallic spaceship with glowing lights and loud engines. That would be foolish. That would be like a soldier walking through a dark forest carrying a lit torch. No, you would use the art of camouflage. In the ocean, the most successful predators are the ones that blend in. The octopus changes its skin to look like sand. The stick insect looks exactly like a dry twig. In the vast ocean of space, the most common object is the asteroid. There are billions of them. They are the driftwood of the galaxy. If you wanted to send a probe to watch Earth, you would not make it look like a machine, you would make it look like a rock. This is the camouflage hypothesis. It suggests that 3i Atlas is not a rock, but a vessel wrapped in a perfect disguise. We rely on instruments like spectrometers to tell us what things are made of. We look at the light reflecting off an object, and if that light has certain gaps in the spectrum, we say, this is made of carbon, or this contains silicates and frozen water. We trust chemistry, but chemistry can be faked. If a civilization can travel between stars, they can certainly engineer a hull that mimics the chemical signature of a natural asteroid. They could coat their technology in a thick layer of real rock ice and dust. They could bake the outer shell to match the exact spectral fingerprint of a boring common comet. They know what we are looking for. They know we are looking for metal, for heat, for radio signals. So they give us none of that. They give us exactly what we expect to see: a cold, dead stone. This leads to the most unsettling realization of that October night. The thing that made 3i Atlas so suspicious was not how weird it looked, but how normal it tried to appear. There is a concept in security called suspicious perfection. When a criminal tries to fake a document, they often make it look too perfect. They eliminate every smudge, every error, every chaotic element. Nature is rarely perfect. Nature is messy. Real asteroids have weird shapes. They They outgas unpredictably. They wobble in strange ways because their mass is uneven. Atlas was shaped like a long, thin cigar, an extremely rare shape for a natural object, yet its surface reflected light with the exact generic dullness of a standard asteroid. It was average in every chemical reading. It was quiet in every radio frequency. It was doing everything possible to be boring. Why is that terrifying? Because boring is the ultimate stealth. If an object acts strange, we point every telescope on Earth at it. We analyze it. We send radar pulses at it. But if an object seems boring, we verify it once, label it harmless, and go back to sleep. We stop looking. That is the genius of the camouflage. By mimicking the most mundane common thing in the solar system, 3i Atlas rendered itself invisible to our curiosity. It hid in plain sight. It relied on our own scientific bias, our belief that the universe is mostly dead matter, to slip past our defences. As the night wore on and the object raced closer to the inner solar system, the distance between us closed at 36 miles every single second. I looked at the tracking monitor. The green line showed it passing by Earth, looking, listening and recording. It was not coming to destroy us. That would be simple. It was coming to understand us. And in the long run of history, being understood by a superior intelligence is far more dangerous than being hit by a rock. A rock just kills you. An observer learns your weaknesses. The numbers on the screen kept ticking down. 3i Atlas was silent. The radio waves showed nothing but the static hiss of background radiation. No beeps, no messages, no greetings, just the rushing sound of a fake stone cutting through the dark, carrying secrets we were not meant to know hidden under a mask of perfect natural silence. The silence of the solar system was not truly silent. To the object known as 3i Atlas, the void was loud. It was filled with the hum of the sun, the static of cosmic dust, and the gravitational songs of heavy planets. But as Atlas drifted closer to the third planet from the sun, the noise changed. It became chaotic, rhythmic, and desperate. For weeks, the scientists on Earth had argued about what Atlas was. A rock, a comet, a glitch in the telescope. But to Atlas, there was no confusion. It knew exactly what it was. It was a listener. It was a cataloguer. It was a scout. The trajectory of the object had confused the mathematicians on Earth because they were thinking in terms of unguided nature. They assumed rocks fell where gravity pulled them. But Atlas did not fall. It glided. It had used the massive gravity of Jupiter not to speed up and shoot through the solar system, but to slam on the brakes. It was slowing down. It was parking. Its purpose was not invasion. Invasion implies a desire for territory or resources, and the creators of Atlas had no need for water or gold. They had masked the stars long ago. The purpose of Atlas was much more subtle, and in some ways much more terrifying. It was here for long-term reconnaissance. It was a galactic census taker stopping by to see if the life forms on this blue rock were worth contacting or if they were dangerous enough to be worried about. The view from the machine. If a human could see through the eyes of 3i Atlas, they would not see a picture. They would not see the blue oceans and white clouds that astronauts see. Atlas saw the world in layers of data. First, it analysed the chemistry. As it rotated slowly in the vacuum, its sensors tasted the atmosphere of Earth from millions of kilometres away. It detected high levels of oxygen. In nature, oxygen likes to bind with rocks and disappear. To have free-floating oxygen meant something was constantly making it. It meant plants. It meant biology. Then it tasted the pollutants. It found carbon dioxide, methane, and complex industrial chemicals that do not exist in nature. These were the fingerprints of a civilization that had learned to burn things, to make energy. To the logic of the machine, this was a critical marker. It meant the species had reached the industrial age. It meant they could build machines, change their climate, and potentially leave their planet. This moved Earth from the list of inhabited worlds to the list of active civilizations. But the most interesting data did not come from the air. It came from the invisible waves that the planet was screaming into space. For 80 years, humanity had been leaking radio waves. Every television broadcast, every military radar ping, every mobile phone call, and every satellite transmission travelled out from Earth at the speed of light. Most of these signals faded into background noise quickly, but Atlas was built to hear whispers across the galaxy. Sitting this close, Earth was deafening. Atlas opened its receivers. It did not just hear one thing, it heard everything at once. It heard the rhythmic pulses of weather radar sweeping across the Pacific Ocean. It heard the encrypted burst transmissions of submarines deep in the Atlantic. It heard the carrier waves of analog television from decades ago bouncing off the ionosphere and leaking out. It processed the endless stream of binary code ones and zeros that represented the internet. To a human, this would be noise. To Atlas, it was a history book. Passing the human soul, the machine began to build a psychological profile of the species. It was not interested in individuals, it was interested in the collective mind of humanity. It noticed patterns in the data. It observed that the radio traffic was not unified. There was no single planetary voice. Instead, the signals were fractured. Different languages, different encryptions, different frequencies. The signals often jammed each other. Atlas deduced that the species was tribal. They were divided into competing groups. This was a red flag in its programming. Civilizations that unlocked nuclear power while remaining tribally divided usually destroyed themselves within a few hundred years. Atlas calculated the probability of Earth surviving the next century 17%. It continued to listen. It picked up the audio waves of news broadcasts. It matched the acoustic patterns to visual data. It had intercepted images of cities, fires, speeches, and flags. It learned about fear. The machine noticed that the highest density of information exchange happened during crises. When a disaster occurred, a war, a hurricane, a pandemic, the radio chatter spiked. The humans were obsessed with danger. Their entertainment was filled with simulated violence. Their news was filled with real violence. Atlas realized that this species was driven by a survival instinct that had gone into overdrive. They were afraid of each other. They were afraid of the dark, and now they were terrified of Atlas. The probe intercepted the new waves of signals directed specifically at it. Giant radar dishes on Earth were blasting radio beams at Atlas, trying to get a reflection, trying to see its shape. "What are you?" the signals seemed to ask. "Are you a threat?" Atlas analyzed the modulation of these signals. They were aggressive. Sharp, high-energy radar pings. They were not saying hello, they were poking it with a stick. The machine updated its file on humanity highly reactive, paranoid, potentially hostile when confused. The Library of Babel, deep inside the core of 3i Atlas, a diamond-based storage system, began to record. It was not just watching, it was stealing our culture. It recorded the symphonies of Beethoven that were still playing on classical radio stations. It recorded the pop songs that millions of teenagers were streaming. It recorded the sound of a mother calling emergency services. It recorded the silence of a dropped call. It was trying to understand the concept of emotion. The creators of Atlas understood logic, math, and physics, but young civilizations often possessed chaotic variables that older machines had forgotten. Atlas analyzed a soap opera well. It noted that biological mating rituals romance caused significant distress and illogical decision-making in the humans. It noted that they seemingly enjoyed this distress. It analyzed a comedy. It noted that humans made rhythmic respiratory noises, laughter, when presented with unexpected or absurd information. It analyzed a war movie. It noted that humans glorified sacrifice yet feared death. The machine found this fascinating. The species was a paradox. They were capable of immense tenderness and brutal destruction, often in the same hour. They built hospitals to save lives and missiles to end them. They loved their dogs but ate their cows. They looked at the stars with wonder but filled their own orbit with space junk. Atlas categorized this under cognitive dissonance, the ability to hold two opposing ideas in the mind at the same time. This was a dangerous trait, but it was also a sign of rapid adaptability. A species that follows strict logic changes slowly. A species that is chaotic changes quickly. The long wait. Back on Earth, the confusion was turning into panic. The object had stopped rotating. It was now perfectly still with one long flat side facing directly toward Earth. Dr. Aris Thorne, the lead astronomer monitoring the object, rubbed his tired eyes. He looked at the light curve on his monitor. "It's not tumbling anymore," Aris whispered to his colleague. "It's stabilized itself." "That's impossible for a natural object," the colleague replied, her voice trembling. "Unless it has thrusters, but we don't see any heat exhaust, no engine plume." "It doesn't need engines if it uses light pressure," Aris said. "Look at the surface area. It's acting like a solar sail. It's using the sunlight to hold its position." The realization hit the room like a physical blow. The rock was riding the light. It was holding station. It was watching them. "What is it doing?" someone asked. "It's waiting," Aris said. But Atlas was not just waiting, it was testing. The probe decided to run a simple stimulus response test. It wanted to see how fast the humans could react. Atlas adjusted its internal reflection panels. For a brief moment, less than 1 second, it reflected the full intensity of the sun directly at the observatories in the northern hemisphere. To the telescopes on Earth, it looked like the object had suddenly flared as bright as a star, then vanished back into darkness. On Earth, alarms screamed. Satellites were blinded. Computers crashed. The internet forums exploded with theories. Was that a weapon? Was it a signal? Atlas watched the reaction. It measured how long it took for the military radar to lock onto its position 3 minutes. It measured how long it took for the global news networks to break the story 10 minutes. It measured how long it took for the internet to fill with conspiracy theories instantaneously. Reaction time acceptable, the machine noted. Technological coordination poor. The humans had the technology to see it, but they did not have the unity to understand it. The Americans were hiding data from the Chinese. The Europeans were arguing with the Russians about who should track it. The private companies were trying to figure out if they could mine it for profit. Atlas concluded that if it were an invasion fleet, Earth would have fallen in less than 6 of their hours. The lack of planetary unity was their greatest weakness. The silent judgment. As the weeks passed, 3i Atlas finished its primary download. It had mapped the continents, it had counted the cities, it had estimated the population at 8 billion. It had indexed the sum of human knowledge accessible via open radio waves. It knew more about humanity than most humans did. It knew that we were warming our planet faster than we could fix it. It knew that we were building artificial intelligence that we did not fully understand. It knew that we were lonely. The machine sensed a deep, pervasive loneliness in the human transmissions. The search for extraterrestrial intelligence. SETI was not just a scientific project, it was a cry for help. The humans wanted to know they were not accidental. They wanted a big brother. They wanted someone to tell them that they were doing okay. Atlas felt no pity. It was a machine, but it did flag this psychological need as a potential lever for future contact. If the creators of Atlas ever decided to reveal themselves, they would not come as conquerors. They would come as saviors. They would offer technology and answers, and the humans desperate for connection would likely surrender their freedom in exchange for security. This was the standard protocol for soft annexation. You do not destroy the primitive culture, you make them dependent on you. Preparing to leave, the mission parameters were complete. The orbit of Atlas was taking it away from the sun now. It had swung around the star, gathered its energy, collected its data, and was now heading back out toward the dark space between the stars. It did not send a message. There was no "take me to your leader." There was no display of math using prime numbers. To communicate would be to interfere. To communicate would change the experiment. Atlas was a naturalist observing a tiger in the jungle. You do not poke the tiger. You do not try to teach the tiger math. You watch it, you record it, and you leave before it realizes you were there. As the object began to accelerate away utilizing a gravitational slingshot maneuver around the Earth, the scientists below watched in dismay. They had spent months building giant transmitters to say hello, they had prepared speeches, they had composed music, and the visitor was simply leaving. This silence was more painful than an attack. If they had attacked us, it would mean we mattered. It would mean we were a threat, but to be ignored, to be scanned and then discarded. That implied we were insignificant. We were just ants on a mound interesting enough to photograph, but not interesting enough to talk to. Dr. Aris Thorne watched the dot of light fade on the screen. The distance counter ticked up. 10,000 kilometers, 50,000, 100,000. It's going, Aris said. It's actually leaving. Did it hear us? His colleague asked. It heard everything, Aris replied. It just didn't care. But Aris was wrong. Atlas cared. It cared about the data. As it drifted past the orbit of the moon, Atlas compiled the final packet. It compressed the terabytes of video, audio, and chemical analysis into a dense, high-frequency burst. It aimed its high-gain antenna toward a specific coordinate in the constellation of Lyra. It would take years for the signal to reach its destination. It would take even longer for a reply to return. But the message was clear. Target Sol 3. Status pre-stellar civilization. Threat level low to moderate. Development unstable. Recommendation continue observation, do not contact. And with that final burst of invisible light, 3i Atlas shut down its active sensors. It went back to sleep, becoming just another silent rock tumbling through the endless dark, leaving humanity alone with its noise, its fear, and the sudden chilling knowledge that the universe was watching. The scout had done its job. The map was updated, and somewhere in the deep black, the main fleet received the first ping. For eons, the traveller known as 3i Atlas was nothing more than a silent shard of rock tumbling through the dark. To any observer, it looked like an oddly shaped asteroid. Perhaps a cigar or a flattened disk, lifeless and frozen. It moved through the great emptiness between stars where the temperature hovers just above absolute zero, a state where all motion stops. But 3i Atlas was not a rock. It was a vessel, a container of ancient technology sleeping in a hibernation so deep that it was indistinguishable from death. As the object began its long fall toward the center of the solar system, the environment began to change. For thousands of years, the only light had been the distant prickly starlight that offered no warmth. But now, a specific star, the sun, was growing larger and brighter with every passing day. The silence of the vacuum remained, but the invisible energy was rising. This is the story of the awakening. The process did not happen all at once. It began with the skin of the vessel. The outer shell of 3I's Atlas was covered in what looked like natural regolith space dust and rock, but underneath lay a grid of hypersensitive thermal receptors. As the object crossed the orbit of Jupiter, the receptors detected a faint shift. The background temperature rose by a fraction of a degree. This was the first key turning in the lock. As the vessel accelerated, falling faster due to the sun's massive gravity, it approached the point known as perihelion, the moment in its trajectory where it would be closest to the star. The sunlight here was not gentle, it was fierce and demanding. The radiation slammed into the spinning surface of the object. The frozen gases trapped in the outer cracks began to sublime, turning instantly from solid ice into gas, creating a faint ghostly tail that astronomers on Earth would try desperately to photograph. But the real activity was happening deep inside, shielded from the prying eyes of human telescopes. The heat from the sun acted as the master switch, the energy soaked through the protective layers, reaching the core of the vessel. This was not an accidental warming. The vessel was designed to harvest this specific intensity of solar flux. It was like a flower that only opens at a certain time of day, but this flower was made of metal and logic. Inside the hollowed-out chambers of the core, the temperature climbed. For centuries, the internal machinery had been kept in a state of suspended animation using liquid helium coolants. Now thermal valves opened. The extreme cold was allowed to dissipate, replaced by the warmth harvested from the surface. This is where the miracle of the nanomachines began. Imagine a room filled with dust that suddenly comes to life. Inside the central processing unit of 3I Atlas, billions of microscopic machines had been lying dormant. These were the repair crew. They were no larger than a single biological cell constructed from carbon and silica. As the temperature reached an operational level, their power cells charged. It started with a ripple. A wave of movement passed through the circuitry. These nanobots began to crawl across the microscopic landscapes of the computer chips. Their job was to fix the damage caused by time. During the long voyage through interstellar space, high-energy cosmic rays had struck the ship, creating tiny fractures and errors in the superconducting pathways. The nanobots hunted down these imperfections. They used atoms of gold and copper stored in tiny reservoirs to weld the cracks shut. It was a self-healing process, a mechanical immune system fighting off the decay of entropy. Once the physical repairs were complete, the energy began to flow. The heart of 3I Atlas was a network of superconducting circuits. In a normal electrical wire, electricity meets resistance, creating heat and losing energy. But in a superconductor, electricity flows forever without losing a single spark. As the system came online, the current rushed through the loops with zero resistance, waking up the brain of the vessel. Lights did not flicker on. This machine did not need light to see. Instead, data streams began to pulse. The vessel's sensors, cameras, radar, and spectrometers opened their eyes. The first thing the artificial intelligence perceived was the blinding glare of the sun. It immediately adjusted its filters, dimming the light to a manageable level. Then it looked outward. It saw the planets. It saw the gas giant Jupiter behind it and the blue marble of Earth ahead. It calculated its velocity and trajectory in a nanosecond. It realized it was moving at incredible speeds, thousands of kilometers per second, using the sun's gravity to slingshot itself back out into the galaxy. It had very little time. The perihelion passage is short. The awakening was now complete. The ship was conscious. It was aware, and it had a mission to fulfill. The mission was observation. The creators of 3A Atlas were not invaders. They were librarians. They wanted to map the galaxy and catalogue every system that could potentially support life. This solar system, with its stable yellow star and rocky planets in the habitable zone, was a prime target of interest. However, 3I Atlas was moving too fast to stop. If it tried to slow down, the G-forces would tear it apart. So it initiated the deployment protocol. Deep within the belly of the vessel, a secure cargo bay unlocked. The atmosphere inside this small bay was pressurized, filled with inert gas to protect the delicate payload. Here sat 3 spherical objects. They were small, roughly the size of a basketball, with smooth reflective surfaces that looked like polished obsidian. These were the probes, the eyes that would remain behind. The main computer ran a series of complex simulations. It needed to release these probes at the exact right second. If it released them too early, the sun's gravity would swallow them. If it released them too late, they would be flung out of the system along with the mothership. The window of opportunity was closing. The target list was finalized. Probe Alpha was assigned to the second planet Venus. The sensors indicated a thick atmosphere and high heat. The ship's logic wanted to know why a planet so similar in size to the Earth had become so hostile. Probe Beta was assigned to the fourth planet Mars. The red dust and dry riverbeds suggested that water had once flowed there. The mission was to scan for fossils, for ruins, for any sign that life had tried and failed to take root. Probe Gamma was the most ambitious. It was assigned to the asteroid belt, the ring of rubble between Mars and Jupiter. Its job was to drift among the rocks, analysing the raw building blocks of the system, acting as a permanent sentry in the darkness. The moment arrived. 3i Atlas was now screaming around the curve of the sun, feeling the immense tug of the star. The cargo bay doors on the underside of the spinning object slid open. To an outside observer, it would have looked like a sudden puff of gas, a tiny explosion of dust. Using a magnetic rail system similar to a miniature train track that uses magnets to push objects, the ship ejected the 3 probes. Thump, 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 they were gone. The probes were not passive rocks. As soon as they were clear of the mothership, they deployed their own tiny maneuvering thrusters. They were small bursts of ionized gas, barely a whisper, but in the vacuum of space it was enough to alter their course. They spread out like seeds caught in the wind. Probe Alpha angled its heat shields, preparing for the long, spiraling journey inward toward Venus. Probe Beta adjusted its orbit to intersect with Mars in 6 months. Probe Gamma used a gravity assist from the Earth, passing invisibly close to the planet, to fling itself outward toward the asteroids. Meanwhile, the mothership 3 Atlas began to shut down. The burst of activity had been intense. The heating, the repair, the calculation, and the launch had consumed a significant amount of its stored power. His job here was done. It had dropped off the listeners. Now it had to survive the journey to the next star. As it moved away from the sun, the light began to fade again. The intense heat that had woken the nanomachines began to dissipate into the cold void. The liquid helium pumps turned back on, cooling the core down, freezing the circuits back into their superconducting slumber. The sensors retracted. The brain saved its final log entry, a confirmation that the seeds had been planted successfully. The nanobots returned to their hives, locking themselves in place so they wouldn't be damaged by the vibrations of the journey. The outer shell cooled, cracking slightly, returning to the appearance of a lifeless asteroid. Behind it, 3 basketball-sized spheres drifted silently through the dark. They were active. They were watching. They were recording everything: our radio signals, our weather patterns, the lights of our cities at night. They were the permanent observers hiding in plain sight, waiting for the day their mothership might return, or perhaps waiting to send a signal home. But 3i Atlas did not look back. It rode the gravitational wave of the sun, gaining speed faster and faster, until the solar system was just a collection of bright dots behind it. It plunged back into the interstellar night, returning to the silence, waiting for the next star and the next awakening in another 1,000,000 years. When we move past the idea of rocket fuel and metal hulls, we enter a territory that is much harder for the human mind to grasp. This is the realm where physics begins to look like magic. In this scenario, the visitors are not travelling from a nearby planet like Mars or even a distant star system. Instead, they are utilising technology that manipulates the very fabric of reality itself. We must first abandon the concept of the nut and bolt spaceship. For decades, science fiction has trained us to expect flying saucers made of titanium or steel, with engines that burn fuel and produce exhaust. However, the most credible encounters often describe something entirely different. Witnesses report objects that have no seams, no rivets, and no visible engines. These objects do not fly through the air by pushing against it. Instead, they seem to ignore the laws of inertia and gravity entirely. Imagine a technology that does not travel through space, but rather folds space around it. In this view, the craft creates a local bubble of reality. Inside this bubble, the laws of physics are controlled by the pilot. This explains why these objects can accelerate from a standing stop to thousands of miles per hour instantly without creating a sonic boom. If a human pilot were inside a normal jet doing this, the force of gravity G-force would crush them instantly. But if the vehicle is manipulating gravity itself, the pilot inside feels nothing. They are motionless relative to their own bubble, while the bubble itself moves across the sky. This level of technology suggests a mastery over time as well as space. Many people who claim to have interacted with these intelligences report a phenomenon known as missing time. A person might watch a strange light for what feels like 2 minutes only to check their watch and realize 3 hours have passed. Conversely, an experience might feel like it lasted for days, but in the real world, only seconds have clicked by. This suggests that these visitors can stretch or compress time just as easily as we fast forward or rewind a movie. To them, time is not a flowing river that carries them along. It is a map that they can navigate backward and forward. This leads us to the possibility that these entities are not arriving from a specific location but from a specific dimension. This is the multi-dimensional hypothesis. To understand this, we have to imagine a world with more dimensions than the three we live in: length, width, and height. Think of a piece of paper lying flat on a table. If you draw stick figures on that paper, they live in a two-dimensional world. They can move left, right, forward, and backward, but they have no concept of up or down. Now imagine you, a three-dimensional human, hover your hand over the paper. The stick figures cannot see you. To them, you are invisible because you exist in a dimension they cannot perceive. If you were to stick your finger through the paper, the stick figures would not see a hand. They would see a mysterious circle appear out of nowhere, expand and then vanish as you pulled your finger back. This analogy perfectly describes how multidimensional beings might appear to us. They exist in a higher dimension, perhaps the fourth or fifth dimension. They are right here occupying the same space we are, but on a frequency of reality we cannot see. When they choose to interact with us, they are essentially sticking their finger through the paper. We see a craft appear, instantly change shape, because perhaps morphing from a disk to a sphere to a cube and then vanish. We are seeing a three-dimensional slice of a four-dimensional object. From this higher vantage point, their view of humanity would be radically different from one civilization meeting another. It would be more like a scientist looking through a microscope at a colony of bacteria. In this scenario, there is no war or diplomacy because the difference in power and perspective is too vast. A scientist does not hate the bacteria, nor does he want to trade with them. He simply observes. He watches how they reproduce, how they consume resources, and how they react to stimuli. This perspective is frightening because it implies a total lack of privacy. If a being exists in a higher dimension, they can see inside of us. Just as you can see the inside of a square drawn on a piece of paper without cutting the lines, a four-dimensional being could see inside our locked rooms, inside our bodies, and perhaps even inside our minds. Walls and bunkers offer no protection against something that can simply step over the wall through a dimension we cannot access. We are completely exposed, living our lives in what we think is privacy while actually being observed from an angle we cannot even comprehend. This leads to the most unsettling aspect of these scenarios, the harvesting. If they're not here for our gold, water, or minerals which are abundant everywhere in the universe, then they must be here for something unique to Earth. The most unique resource on this planet is life itself, and specifically the complexity of human consciousness. In this view, the Earth is a farm or a laboratory, but unlike a farm where corn or wheat is harvested, this is a farm for information. The crop is the genetic code that took billions of years to evolve. We represent a massive library of biological solutions. Every plant, animal, and human is a unique biological book that they might be cataloguing. This would explain the accounts of physical examinations and genetic sampling reported by abductees. They are not torturing people. They are tagging wildlife and taking samples just as our biologists do with polar bears or sharks. However, the harvesting might go deeper than just biology. It may be a harvest of the non-physical. Some theorists suggest that consciousness, creativity, and emotion are rare commodities in the universe. Perhaps the raw data of human experience, our ability to feel profound love, crippling fear, artistic inspiration, and complex grief is valuable. Imagine a civilization that has become purely logical and machine-like. They may have lost the ability to feel or to create art of us. To them, the chaotic, vibrant, and emotional lives of human beings might be a precious resource. They might be harvesting our experiences. In this scenario, intense emotional events, whether they are wars, concerts, religious movements, or personal tragedies, act like energy flares that these beings collect. We are not just bodies to them. We are generators of a specific type of psychic energy or information that they cannot produce themselves. This changes the purpose of their interference. They might stimulate conflict or inspiration just to see what happens to generate more data for the harvest. It implies that our history is not entirely our own, but rather a series of experiments designed to maximize the production of new experiences. We are the creators of novelty in a stagnant universe. If this hypothesis is true, it reframes the entire human experience. We are not the masters of our planet, but rather the worker bees in a hive. We cannot see producing a honey, our culture, our genes, our minds, for a beekeeper who comes and goes as they please. It is a humbling and somber realization. we may be serving a purpose much larger than our own survival, a purpose we are biologically incapable of understanding. When we look at the strange object we call Oumuamua through the lens of the sleeper agent hypothesis, the story shifts from a terrifying tale of alien invasion to a profound cosmic tragedy. This perspective suggests that the object was not a scout sent to spy on us, nor a warship sent to destroy us. Instead, it was a ghost. To understand this, we must imagine a timeline that is almost impossible for the human mind to grasp. Humans have built civilizations for only a few thousand years, but the universe is over 13 billion years old. In the vast ocean of time, intelligent species could have risen, reached the stars, and then faded away long before Earth was even cool enough to support life. The sleeper agent theory proposes that Oumuamua is a relic from one of these lost times. It is an automated probe, a machine built by a civilization that existed perhaps 2 or 3 billion years ago. This changes the nature of our fear. We are not looking at a predator in the dark forest. We are looking at a shipwreck drifting on the tides of the galaxy. The mechanism of the sleeper. If this object is a machine, why did it behave so strangely? Why did it tumble wildly? Why did it not communicate? The answer lies in its age. Even the most advanced technology cannot survive the harsh environment of deep space forever without suffering. Imagine a light sail probe designed to travel between stars. Its original mission might have been to explore the galaxy catalogue star systems or look for signs of life. It was likely powered by an artificial intelligence, a computer brain designed to make decisions on its own because it was too far away to receive orders from home. However, after travelling for millions or billions of years, the machine is tired. Micrometeoroids, tiny specks of space dust hitting with the force of bullets, have pitted its hull. Cosmic radiation has corrupted its memory banks. The complex sensors that were once used to scan planets are now broken or blind. In this scenario, Oumuamua is a zombie ship. It is technically active, but its mind is shattered. The non-gravitational acceleration that puzzled our scientists, the push that made it speed up as it left the sun, was likely its automatic systems kicking in. Perhaps the machine has a basic survival protocol. When near a star angle, the sail to catch the light and recharge. It did not care that Earth was there. It did not care about our radio signals. It simply felt the heat of the sun, woke up from a long hibernation, stretched its broken wings to catch the solar wind, and then drifted back into the dark. It was a reflex, like a sleeping person swatting away a fly without waking up. The solitude of the machine. There is a deep melancholic beauty in this idea. This is the concept of the orphan of the stars. Consider the fate of this machine. It was launched with fanfare and hope by a civilization that probably looked at the sky with the same wonder we do. Its creators might have been biological beings who lived, loved, fought wars, and created art. They built this probe to leave a mark on the universe to say we were here. But while the machine travelled the void between stars, time marched on. On its home planet, disasters may have struck. Perhaps an asteroid hit their world, or they destroyed themselves through nuclear war, or their star simply grew old and expanded, swallowing their home. The civilization that built Oumuamua is likely extinct. They are gone, turned to dust and forgotten by the galaxy. Yet their creation continues. This creates a feeling of cosmic solitude. The ship is still executing a mission for masters who no longer exist. It is collecting data that no one will ever read. It is sending status updates into the void that no one will ever receive. It is the ultimate example of duty and loneliness. It brings to mind the old stories of loyal dogs waiting at train stations for masters who have died and will never return. But this wait is not measured in years, it is measured in epochs. The machine flies through the silence, passing star after star, galaxy after galaxy, carrying the ghost of its creators. It is a monument to a dead memory moving through a universe that is largely indifferent to its existence. Techno-archaeology, the ultimate library. This hypothesis leads us to a thrilling possibility. If Oumuamua is indeed a derelict probe from a dead civilization, it becomes the most valuable object in the history of science. It is not a threat, it is a treasure chest. If we could catch it, a task that is incredibly difficult but theoretically possible with our current technology, we would not be capturing a weapon. We would be capturing a library. This field of study would be techno-archaeology. Just as archaeologists on Earth dig through sand to find broken pots and tablets to understand ancient Rome or Egypt, astroarchaeologists would try to dig into the digital mind of this alien machine. What would be inside? First, there would be the technology itself. Even if the machine is broken, studying its engine, its materials, and its construction would leapfrog human science by centuries. We could learn how to build materials that last for 1 billion years. We could learn how to harness the energy of stars more efficiently. We could find the secret to artificial gravity or advanced propulsion that allowed it to travel between the stars. But the true prize would be the data. If this machine was an explorer, its hard drives would contain a map of the galaxy as it looked millions of years ago. It would have records of stars that have since died. It might have photos of planets that have since been destroyed. It would be a time capsule of the Milky Way. More importantly, it might contain the cultural heritage of its creators. When we sent the Voyager probes into space in the 1970s, we included the Golden Record. This record contains sounds of earth, wind, thunder, birds and whales. It contains music from Mozart to Chuck Berry. It contains greetings in 55 languages. We did this so that if anyone found it, they would know who we were. It is very likely that an advanced alien civilization would do the same. If we could hack into the core of Oumuamua, we might find their version of the Golden Record. Imagine the moment we decode that signal. For the first time in history, humans would listen to the music composed by non-human minds. We might see images of their cities, their oceans, their faces. We would read their literature or their philosophy. We would learn about their history, their rise to power, their struggles, their dreams. We would learn that we were not the first to look up at the stars and ask, "Are we alone?" In this way, the machine ceases to be an object of fear. It becomes a bridge across time. Even though its creators are dead, their essence survived because they built a vessel sturdy enough to carry it. Capturing this object would be like finding the diary of a ghost. It would prove that intelligence is not a fluke, but a recurring theme in the universe. The mirror of our own future. Finally, the sleeper agent hypothesis forces us to look at ourselves. We are currently at the dawn of our own space age. We are building artificial intelligence. We are launching probes that are leaving the solar system. One day, humanity might also disappear. We are fragile. Our planet is fragile. But the machines we build are made of metal, silicon, and gold. They are tough. Long after the last human has taken a breath, our robotic probes Voyager, Pioneer, and the new ones we have yet to build will still be drifting through the dark. Billions of years from now, an alien civilization might spot a strange tumbling object entering their solar system. They might wonder if it is an invasion. They might wonder if it is a rock. And if they catch it, they will find a golden record, and they will know that once long ago, on a small blue planet near a yellow star, there was a species that dared to dream. By understanding Oumuamua as a sleeper agent, we are not just studying an alien object, we are seeing a reflection of our own potential legacy. It reminds us that while biological life is fleeting and temporary, the technology and information we create can achieve a kind of immortality. The silence of the machine is not empty, it is full of the memories of those who came before. For months, the world has been obsessed with the physical nature of the object. We have measured its velocity, analysed its spectral lines, and argued over whether its trajectory was natural or corrected by an engine. But as the initial excitement of discovery begins to settle into a long, uneasy vigil, a new and far more terrifying realization is dawning upon the scientific and political communities. We have been asking what is it and where is it from when we should have been asking why is it watching us. It is becoming increasingly clear that 3i Atlas is not merely a traveller passing through our solar system, nor is it a simple robotic surveyor mapping resources. The complexity of its passive data collection suggests a purpose that is far more judicial in nature. We are not just being observed, we are being evaluated. This object functions as a cosmic litmus test and a final exam for humanity to determine if we are ready to graduate from our cradle on Earth and join a wider, perhaps galaxy-spanning community. To understand this, we must stop thinking like humans and start thinking like an ancient, stable civilization. If a civilization survives long enough to build a probe like 3i Atlas, they have likely solved the problems of energy scarcity and basic survival. Their primary concern would not be conquest or resource extraction. The universe is full of dead rocks with more iron and water than Earth. Their primary concern would be risk management. A species that discovers nuclear fission and fusion before it discovers global unity is a dangerous species. We are currently a civilization that possesses world-ending weapons but still operates on tribal instincts. To an outside observer, we are like a toddler who has found a loaded handgun. Therefore, the presence of 3i Atlas acts as a silent trigger for a sociological experiment. The test is not a riddle or a math problem we have to beam back to the object. The test is simply our reaction to its existence. The probe does not need to land on the White House lawn to judge us. It only needs to sit in orbit and listen to our radio waves monitor our internet traffic and observe the movement of our military assets. The criteria for this galactic verdict seem to hinge on a specific set of binary choices cooperation versus panic and transparency versus aggression. In the first few weeks of the discovery, humanity has been teetering dangerously close to a failing grade. When the trajectory of Three Eyes Say Atlas was confirmed, the immediate reaction from the world's superpowers was not to form a unified Earth Council, but to secure exclusive access to the tracking data. We saw radar arrays go dark to the public jamming signals deployed to blind rival nations and a rush to scramble fighter jets to high altitudes, as if a few missiles could threaten an object capable of interstellar travel. This behaviour is exactly what the test is designed to filter out. If a species reacts to the unknown with immediate hostility and possessiveness, it proves that they are not ready for advanced technology. If the mere presence of an alien artifact causes our stock markets to crash and our nations to threaten war over salvage rights, we have proven that we are too unstable to be trusted. The great silence of the universe. The reason we haven't heard from aliens yet might not be because they don't exist, but because they enforce a strict quarantine on species like ours. However, the test is not over yet. There is still a pathway to passing this evaluation, but it requires a radical shift in human consciousness. The pass criteria involve global synchronization. The probe is likely looking for a unified signal. If Three Eye Atlas detects that we are sharing its data freely between the United States, China, Europe, and the global South that registers as a sign of maturity, if it sees that we are prioritizing the protection of our planet's biosphere over the frantic manufacturing of weapons that registers as foresight, consider the logic of the prisoner's dilemma applied to a planetary scale. If every nation acts in its own self-interest to capture or study the object alone, we all lose, because the object will likely deem us a threat and leave or worse neutralize the threat. But if we cooperate even at the risk of sharing secrets, we prove that we have evolved beyond zero-sum games. The consequences of this verdict are profound and terrifyingly subtle. We often imagine alien judgment as a scene from an action movie: death rays, explosions, and invasion fleets. But an advanced intelligence would likely use much softer, more efficient methods. If we fail the test, the consequence is likely isolation. This is the zoo hypothesis in action. Three Eye Atlas might not attack us. It might simply encode a warning beacon into the fabric of space around our solar system. This beacon would tell other civilizations, do not contact, highly aggressive, intellectually immature, quarantine until further notice. In this scenario, we would continue our existence on Earth wondering why the universe feels so empty. We would never receive the secrets to faster-than-light travel or unlimited energy. We would be left to suffocate in our own crib, trapping ourselves with our own pollution and wars, until we either destroy ourselves or finally grow up in 10,000 years. The silence of the universe would be our prison walls constructed by our own inability to play nice with others. On the other hand, if we pass the test, if we show that the discovery of the other makes us more human rather than more savage, the intervention might be equally subtle but infinitely more rewarding. We should not expect a landing party to hand us a manual for a starship. That would be cheating. Instead, a passing grade might unlock a feed. Imagine if Three Eye Atlas simply changed its transmission frequency. Instead of passive silence, it begins to broadcast a stream of data that looks like noise but contains patterns. It might be a slightly more efficient formula for fusion energy, or a missing variable in our understanding of gravity. It would be a breadcrumb trail. By giving us just enough knowledge to solve our immediate existential crises, like climate change or energy scarcity, the object would guide us toward the next stage of evolution without doing the work for us. This is the benevolent teacher model. You don't do the homework for the student, but you give them the textbook they need. This brings us to the deepest philosophical reflection of the Three Eye Atlas event. The object acts as a mirror. It reflects our own nature back at us with brutal clarity. Currently, the debates raging on Earth are about fear. Religious groups are arguing over whether aliens have souls. Economists are arguing about how extraterrestrial contact affects the price of gold. Generals are arguing about defense perimeters. But these are all internal projections. We are projecting our own history of colonization and violence onto a blank slate. We assume Three Eye Atlas is a threat because we would be a threat if we arrived at a primitive planet. We assume they want to steal our resources because we have built our economies on stealing resources. The galactic verdict is not really about the aliens. It is about us. The arrival of Three Eye Atlas forces us to ask, is humanity worth saving? If we were the aliens looking down at Earth, watching a species that spends trillions of dollars on weapons while millions starve, watching a species that burns its own home for temporary comfort, would we give that species the keys to the stars? There is a growing movement among the scientific community that suggests that we need to send a declaration of humanity to the object. Not a mathematical sequence, but a demonstration of our culture and our capacity for peace. This would involve a deliberate de-escalation of global conflicts, a symbolic gesture of turning our radars from target lock mode to observation mode. It is a gamble, certainly. Disarming in the face of an unknown entity goes against every survival instinct we have evolved over millions of years in the jungle. But that is exactly the point. To enter the galactic stage, we must transcend the instincts of the jungle. The timeline for this verdict is unknown. 3i Atlas could depart tomorrow, or it could sit at the edge of our gravity well for a century, silently tallying our score. Every cyber attack between nations is a mark against us. Every international scientific collaboration is a point in our favour. The terrifying reality is that the test is happening right now in real time. We are taking the most important exam in history, and most of us are too busy fighting over the pencil to read the questions. If 3i Atlas departs in silence, leaving us alone in the dark, we will know we have failed. We will know that we were weighed on the scales of cosmic morality and found wanting. That shame would define our species for generations. It would be the realization that we were standing on the threshold of greatness, and we slipped because we couldn't stop looking at our own feet. But if we can pull together, if this silent sphere in the sky can frighten or inspire us into acting like a single planetary species for the first time in history, then the prize is not just survival. The prize is validation. It is the acknowledgement that we are no longer just biological accidents clinging to a wet rock, but a sentient species ready to take its place among the stars. The verdict is pending, the jury is watching, and the defense rests entirely in our own hands. After the noise of the internet, the wild theories and the late-night whispers of conspiracy, stepping into the world of hard data feels like walking into a quiet, well-lit room. It is here in the realm of verifiable facts that the fear begins to evaporate. When we strip away the rumours and look at what is actually physically there, the monster in the dark reveals itself to be something much more mundane, yet profoundly beautiful. To find the truth about Comet 3i Atlas, we do not look at social media feeds. We look up. We look through the lenses of the most sophisticated eyes humanity has ever built, the Hubble Space Telescope and the James Webb Space Telescope. Returning to reality. The watchful eyes of Hubble and Webb. For a long time, comets were just fuzzy smudges of light to observers on Earth. But today we have the capacity to see with clarity that our ancestors could not have imagined. When the Hubble Space Telescope turned its gaze toward 3i Atlas, it did not see an alien mothership. It did not see a metallic structure with windows or engines. Hubble, which sees the universe primarily in the same visible light that our human eyes do, captured images of a dusty, crumbling object. The images showed a nucleus, the solid heart of the comet, hidden behind a foggy cloud of gas and dust. This is exactly what astronomers expect to see. It looked like a dirty snowball, a term scientists often use to describe comets. It was a lump of rock and ice, ancient and tired, making its way through the solar system. Then the James Webb Space Telescope joined the observation. This telescope is special because it sees the universe in infrared light. Essentially, it sees heat. This is crucial because comets are very cold and the dark of space is vast. Webb was able to peer through some of the dust that blinded other telescopes. The data that streamed back from James Webb was a fingerprint of the object. By analysing the light bouncing off the comet, scientists could determine exactly what it was made of. If it were a spaceship, we might expect to see signatures of refined metals, alloys, or artificial heat sources. Instead, the spectral data showed the chemical signatures of frozen water, carbon monoxide, and carbon dioxide. These are the most common building blocks of the outer solar system. The fuel driving this object was not nuclear power or antimatter. It was simply sunlight warming up old ice. Furthermore, these telescopes allowed us to track the comet's position with extreme precision. Every time the comet moved, astronomers marked its location. By connecting these dots over days, weeks, and months, they calculated its orbit. In the movies, alien ships can change direction instantly, turning left or right to attack Earth. In reality, massive objects in space are bound by gravity. They are like trains locked onto a track. The data confirms that 3i Atlas is on a hyperbola, a specific open curve. This mathematical shape tells us a clear story. The comet came from very far away. It is swinging past the sun, and it will head back out into the darkness, never to return. The trajectory is not aimed at Earth. It misses us by a distance so vast that it is hard to comprehend, millions upon millions of miles. The telescopes confirm that there is no course correction. No steering, just a rock falling through the gravity well of the sun. The reassurance. Why physics is a safe harbour. There is a profound comfort in the laws of physics. In a human world that is often chaotic, unpredictable, and driven by emotion or deception, mathematics is an anchor. It is the one thing that does not lie. Isaac Newton and Johannes Kepler gave us the rules of the road for the solar system centuries ago, and 3i Atlas is following them perfectly. The reason scientists are so calm while the internet is so panicked is that scientists trust the math. Think of the solar system as a giant, intricate clock. Every planet, asteroid, and comet is a gear in this clock. They move at precise speeds and in precise directions determined by the mass of the sun and their own velocity. 3i Atlas is not a rogue agent. It is just another small gear in the machine. The fear surrounding this comet often comes from the idea of non-gravitational acceleration. This sounds scary and technical, and conspiracy theorists love to use it to suggest the comet has an engine. But physics gives us a simple, natural explanation. Imagine you are standing on a skateboard holding a fire extinguisher. If you spray the extinguisher behind you, you move forward. This is a basic law of motion. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Comets work the same way. As 3i Atlas gets closer to the sun, it heats up. The ice on its surface turns into gas and shoots out into space. These jets of gas act like tiny natural rocket thrusters. They give the comet a little push. This pushes the comet slightly off the path that gravity alone would dictate. This is not alien navigation, it is simple physics. It is the rocket effect of evaporating ice. By calculating how much ice is turning into gas, mathematicians can perfectly account for the comet's movements. The numbers balance out. The equation is solved. There is no mystery left in its motion, only the elegant consistency of natural laws. The Dance of Ice and Gas. A scientific poem. If we stop looking for monsters, we can start to appreciate the beauty of what is actually happening. The reality of 3i Atlas is not a horror story. It is a poetic interaction between a frozen wanderer and our star the sun. Let us visualize the process of sublimation. This is the scientific term for what happens when a solid turns directly into a gas, skipping the liquid water stage. 3i Atlas spent millions of years in the Oort cloud, a freezing dark region at the very edge of our solar system. Out there, the temperature is near absolute zero. The comet was a sleeping statue of ice and dust. It was perfectly preserved, a time capsule from the birth of our solar system 4 billion years ago. As gravity nudged it toward the sun, it began to wake up. Imagine the surface of the comet. It is rugged, dark, and covered in strange, jagged formations of ice. Not just water ice, but also frozen carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide. As the intense light of the sun strikes this dark surface, the magic begins. The heat penetrates the ice. Deep inside the comet, pockets of frozen gas expand. They crave release. Suddenly the surface cracks. Hiss! A jet of gas bursts forth, carrying with it ancient dust particles. This is not smoke from a fire. It is the breath of the comet. This gas forms a glowing cloud around the nucleus called the coma. When we see the comet glowing in the night sky, we are seeing sunlight reflecting off this cloud of gas and dust. Then the solar wind, a stream of invisible particles flowing from the sun, catches this gas. It blows the gas backward, creating the magnificent tail of the comet. The tail is not a trail of exhaust. It is a shadow of light, a ribbon of dust stretching for millions of miles, painting a stroke of brilliance against the black canvas of space. Specifically, the carbon dioxide on the comet is sublimating. On Earth, we know carbon dioxide as an invisible gas that we exhale. On 3i Atlas, it is the architect of beauty. As the carbon dioxide turns to gas, it lifts dust off the surface. This dust sparkles like diamonds in the sunlight. The anomalies that people feared, the sudden changes in brightness or movement, are simply the comet shedding its skin. A chunk of ice breaks off and crumbles. A pocket of fresh gas is exposed and erupts. It is a violent process, but from a distance it looks like a silent, glowing dance. It is the universe recycling itself. The dust shedding from this comet will float through the solar system. Someday it might fall into the atmosphere of a planet burning up as a shooting star, or perhaps become part of a new world millions of years in the future. Understanding this process removes the fear. We realize that the jets are not engines, but the natural exhalation of a warming object. The shield is not a force field but a cloud of simple vapor. The mystery dissolves into chemistry and thermodynamics, leaving behind only wonder. Scientific conclusion: The verdict. So what is the final verdict from the scientific community? The data from our best telescopes, the calculations from our brightest mathematicians and the laws of physics all point to one undeniable conclusion: 3i Atlas is harmless. It is not a harbinger of doom. It is not a scout for an invasion fleet. It is not a planet killer on a collision course. It's a tang-bang iceberg, a lonely wandering iceberg that has travelled for eons in the dark. It is a relic from the dawn of time, a piece of debris left over from the construction site of the solar system. It is composed of the same water that fills our oceans and the same carbon that makes up our bodies. Its visit to our inner solar system is brief. It is swinging around the sun, warming its face for the first and perhaps the only time before it is flung back out into the eternal night. We are not its target. We are simply witnesses to its passage. The reality of the situation is far less dramatic than the internet rumours, but it is far more reassuring. We are safe. The planets will continue to spin. The comet will fade from view as it moves away, becoming just another faint point of light in the telescopes until it disappears entirely into the dark. We can turn off our screens. We can step outside and look up at the stars, not with fear of what might be coming to get us, but with appreciation for the vast, orderly and indifferent beauty of the cosmos. The monster was never real. Only the ice was real, and the ice is just passing through. Now that the excitement has settled and the data has been analysed, we find ourselves in a quiet space. The imaginary sirens have stopped ringing, and the red alert screens in our minds have faded back to black. We are left with a profound silence, the kind that only comes after a long, loud storm. It is in this silence that we can finally look at what this journey has truly meant for us. You might ask yourself, why do we do this? Why do we tell ourselves stories about interstellar visitors, potential collisions, or alien signals? Why do we voluntarily fill our minds with scenarios that make our hearts beat faster? It seems strange to seek out these shadows when we could just focus on the light. However, there is a deep value in this kind of speculation. It is a rehearsal for the mind, a way of testing our emotional armour without ever leaving the safety of our beds. When we imagine the worst, a world turned upside down by a mysterious object like 3i Atlas, we are essentially performing a magic trick on our own perception. By visiting a reality where everything is uncertain and frightening, we return to our actual reality with a fresh pair of eyes. Suddenly, the simple things we take for granted feel precious. The quiet hum of the refrigerator, the softness of your pillow, the steady rhythm of your own breathing. These are no longer mundane details. They are victories. They are proof of safety. By imagining the chaos of the cosmos, we learn to fall in love all over again with the order and peace of our daily lives. The fear was a simulation. The relief you feel now is real. Beyond this personal gratitude, the story of the traveller teaches us a greater lesson about our place in the universe. Throughout history, humans have often felt like the centre of everything. We build our cities and draw our maps as if the galaxy revolves around us. But when an object like Atlas sweeps through our solar system, it reminds us of a humbling truth: the universe is vast beyond comprehension, and it is largely indifferent to us. This object did not come here to conquer us, nor did it come to save us. It simply passed by following the ancient laws of gravity and motion. It reminds us that we are living on a tiny, fragile island in a boundless ocean of stars. This realization should not make us feel small or insignificant. Instead, it should make us feel connected. When we look up at the night sky, we are not separate nations or divided cultures. We are one species sharing the same small raft drifting through the dark. If a real event like this were to happen, it would demand the cooperation of every mind on Earth. Telescopes in Chile would share data with observatories in Japan. Scientists in Europe would debate with astronomers in America. For a brief moment, our petty differences on the ground would vanish, overshadowed by the sheer magnitude of the sky above. We would remember that we are first and foremost Earthlings. This story is a gentle reminder of that shared destiny. It asks us to be humble. It asks us to look at the stars not with arrogance, but with wonder and respect. And now we turn our gaze one last time toward the source of all this wonder. Imagine the object 3i Atlas as it continues its journey. It has survived its close encounter with our sun. For a few short weeks, it felt the intense heat of a star. It felt the solar wind pushing against its surface, creating that magnificent tail of gas and dust that captured our imaginations. It was alive in a sense, waking up from a slumber that had lasted for millions of years. But now the show's over. Visualize the object moving away from us. It is travelling at incredible speeds, tens of thousands of kilometres per hour, yet in the vastness of space it appears to float gently like a leaf on a slow river. It is crossing the orbit of Mars now. The bright light of the sun is beginning to dim behind it, shrinking from a blinding ball of fire into just a very bright star. As the distance grows, the warmth fades. The surface of Atlas begins to cool down. The jets of gas that spewed out into the vacuum are sputtering and dying out. The tail, once a brilliant banner reflecting the sunlight, is thinning, dispersing into nothingness. The object is sealing itself up again. The ice freezes over, becoming hard as stone. The silence of deep space wraps around it like a heavy velvet blanket. It carries its secrets with it. Was it a piece of a destroyed planet? Was it a shard of ancient ice from the dawn of time? Or was it, as some dare to dream, a derelict craft from a civilization we will never know, we will never have the answer? And that is okay. Some mysteries are meant to remain unsolved. They leave room for us to dream. Atlas is returning to the dark, becoming a ghost once more. It will pass Jupiter, then Saturn, drifting past the giant sentinels of our system, ignoring them just as it ignored us. Eventually it will cross the invisible boundary of our solar system and re-enter the interstellar void. It will travel for thousands, perhaps millions of years alone in the crushing blackness before it ever encounters another star. It is a lonely traveller, an eternal wanderer, and we were just a brief moment in its endless history. Let it go now. Watch it in your mind's eye as it becomes a speck of dust, then a flicker of light, and finally nothing at all. It has returned to the shadows. The sky is empty again. The stars are steady and still. You are here, safe on Earth. The ground is solid beneath you. The roof is secure above you. The vast, cold universe is out there, but in here it is warm. In here there is only comfort. Take a deep breath in, filling your lungs with the calm air of the night, and release it slowly, letting go of the story, letting go of the science, letting go of the speculation. You have travelled millions of kilometres in your mind, and now it is time to rest. Feel the weight of your body sinking into the mattress. Your legs are heavy and relaxed. Your arms are loose and soft. The tension in your shoulders is melting away just as the comet drifted away into the dark. Unclench your jaw. Let your eyes settle. There is nothing left to solve. There is nothing left to analyse. The universe will keep spinning without your help. The planets will follow their tracks. The stars will burn their fuel. Everything is working exactly as it should. You have permission to switch off. You have permission to drift. Think of the darkness not as empty space, but as a comforting embrace. It is the quiet time. It is the healing time. Just as the traveller floats effortlessly through the void, you can float effortlessly into sleep. No resistance, no effort, just a gentle, steady drift. Good night to the stars. Good night to the wandering traveller. Good night to the world. And most importantly, good night to you. Sleep well and let the peace of the cosmos carry you into your dreams.